Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best top lane champions for Season 5, Patch 5.1. And just to clear things up, I'm going to be doing the support video after this, followed by AD carry, and then mid lane after that. So you guys don't need to comment down below telling me what you'd like next, because that is the order I'm going to be doing it in. So starting off at the number 5 spot, I have Wukong. Pros to Wukong he is a super strong team fighter. He also scales really well into the late game, and he's got a great mid game power spike. When you get your second point into your ultimate, you start to do a load of damage because it gives you, I think, 200 base damage when you put your second point into your ultimate, as opposed to your first point. I'm pretty sure you only have like 50 or something. He also has a really sneaky engage with his W. He can act like he's backing off, and then he can just use his W, turn on his opponents with his E, and then pop his ultimate, and it can bring for some pretty strong engages. And he's also got great juking potential with his W as well. Cons to Wukong he doesn't have any mobility, and he does have some weaker matchups in lane, so if you're not confident in your lane matchup, then just start Flask so you can sustain the early game. Next up on my list, I have Irelia. Pros to Irelia she scales really well into the late game. Her passive is also very strong, especially for team fighting, because it's going to be really hard for the enemies to CC you for a substantial duration. She's also got a 2-second stun, which if you can get off on the enemy AD carry in a team fight, you're going to be able to kill them before they can even get out of the stun most of the time. And she's also a very strong duelist because of the 2-second stun she's got, and because she's got true damage on her W. She also has an insane mid-game power spike, because when she picks up the Trinity Force, the item just synergizes so well with her, so she's going to start to do a lot of damage once she picks up that item. And depending on how well her team is doing, she can go full tank, or she can go a few damage items. Like, if your team is doing well, then you could build Trinity Force, and then you could build like Blade of the Ruined King or Maw Malthorius, depending on what you need. However, if your team doesn't do too well in lane, you could just go full tank after building Trinity Force and still do a lot of damage. And she's also got a gap closer on her Q. Cons to Irelia she is quite mana hungry in the early game, and like Wukong, she does have some weaker matchups in lane, so if you're not confident in your matchup, then just start Flask so you can sustain the early game. Next up on my list, I have Swain. Pros to Swain Morellonomicon just got nerfed this last patch, so a lot of champions aren't going to be building that item anymore. Therefore, Swain gets an indirect buff from that, because Morellonomicon counters him pretty hard because it reduces the healing effects from his ultimate. However, if champions aren't building it anymore, then it's an indirect buff to Swain, because he's going to be healing for a lot more in team fights. He's also a very strong lane bully with his Q, his E, and his W, and he's fairly easy to play, as his E and his Q are both point and click abilities. He's also pretty tanky. I usually like to build Spirit Visage come late game as Swain, which also synergizes really well with his ultimate, because it gives him extra healing on his ultimate. And he's also got pretty strong CC with his W and his Q, and is a late game monster. Cons to Swain he doesn't have any mobility, so make sure you're not pushing out too far in lane, or that you have some wards in the bushes. And Ignite does counter him pretty hard, so if you're going up against the Swain, make sure that someone on your team does have Ignite, because it's going to reduce the healing effects of his ultimate in teamfights by quite a bit, or if you're just dueling him as well. Next up on my list, I have Lissandra. Pros to Lissandra she's got pretty strong mobility with her E. She's also got great CC with her W, her Q, and her ultimate, and she's a very strong team fighter because of that. She's also a pretty good lane bully, because she can poke her opponents down with her Q, and she's very strong against melee or melee champions, however you want to pronounce it. She counters them pretty hard, because whenever they try to engage on her, she can just use her W, back off a little bit, use her Q, and it's going to be really hard for the enemies to jump on Lissandra because of her CC. And in teamfights, it seems like she's also untargetable forever, because she can just use her ultimate on herself, and then after that runs out, she can use Zhonya's, and it's going to be very hard for you to target Lissandra because of that. Cons to Lissandra she is shorter ranged, and outside of laning phase, her passive is pretty useless. So number 1 on my list for patch 5.1 is Malphite. Pros to Malphite are he's got a game-changing ultimate. If you can get a multi-man ultimate off in a team fight with Malphite, it's going to increase your chances of winning that fight by quite a bit, and your team's just going to be able to follow it up with a lot of damage because you're going to knock them up, and your team's going to be able to follow that up pretty easily. He's also very strong against AD champions because his W gives him bonus attack, or it gives him bonus attack damage and bonus armor, and his E also scales with armor as well. He's also pretty simple to use in my opinion, as he really doesn't have any skill shots except for his ultimate, which has a pretty large hitbox radius. He's also very strong when ahead because if you get ahead with Malphite, you can always be looking for picks with his ultimate. He also does a surprising amount of damage. I usually like to build Iceborne Gauntlet on Malphite, and once I pick that up, he actually does quite a bit of damage. And he's also very strong against auto attack based champions because when he slams the ground with his E, it reduces the enemy's attack speed by, I'm not too sure how much, but it reduces their attack speed by quite a bit. Cons to Malphite he is pretty mana hungry in the early game, so I definitely recommend starting Crystalline Flask on Malphite no matter the matchup because you're going to run out of mana pretty quickly, and he does have some weaker matchups in lane. So some honorable mentions for this patch include Rek'Sai, Renekton, Fiora, Akali, Nasus, and Gnar. So Renekton, this recent patch, he got some pretty good buffs. He did get nerfed. His early game did get nerfed a little bit. However, once you get your 3rd rank into your queue, he's going to start to do a load more damage, and he's a lot better late game now. So I definitely recommend trying out Renekton this patch because he's got a really strong level 5 especially. Fiora, she is really only a situational pick. However, if you can find that good situation with Fiora where the enemies don't have a lot of CC and you can get a good opponent in lane, then she does a load of damage, and she's a pretty strong team fighter as well. Rek'Sai is pretty strong in the top lane right now because he's manaless, he's got infinite sustain with his W, and he doesn't really have too many weak matchups in lane, so I definitely recommend trying out Rek'Sai in the top lane. Akali is also a pretty strong top lane pick. She does have a few weaker matchups, but she does quite well in the top lane because she can just easily farm up, as opposed to her in the mid lane where she does go up against quite a few ranged champions, so she does have a little bit harder time in the mid lane. However, in the top lane, because she gets those melee matchups, she can do a lot better in my opinion. And Nasus, if you can find the right matchup with him, then he's a strong pick because come late game as Nasus, he's just a monster, and if you can land your Wither on the enemy AD carry in a team fight as Nasus, you're just going to be able to basically two-shot them if you have enough Q stacks. And Gnar is still a very strong team fighter. He's also got great poke in lane with his Q, so I definitely recommend playing any of these champions in this video, guys. I hope you did enjoy the video. If you did, then be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in my next video.